Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I'm the Communications Manager for the British Dyslexia Association, and I warmly welcome you to this very special Dyslexia Awareness Week webinar for our Helpline Q&A. This evening's webinar will be presented by Kath Lambert and Kim Brown. Dyslexia Awareness Week 2023 focuses on being unique with our theme of Uniquely You. Make sure you are following along on our socials where we are sharing resources, facts, personal stories, and much more. Before we start, you will have seen from our opening slides that we have lots to offer, such as educational videos, webinars, we run training courses and educational conferences, assessments, and have a free helpline, and of course, lots of support for fundraising and events. On our website, you'll find lots of ways to get involved with the BDA, through membership, fundraising, or maybe just signing up to our free newsletter. If you haven't done so already, and of course, don't forget to follow us, and make sure you check out your local dyslexia association too. So for this webinar, normally we wait for questions to be at the end, but it's going to be a little bit different and we will be answering your questions as and when they come in. So please use the Q&A box to write your question and I will read them to our helpline team who will be happy to answer. Just to let you know that we are recording tonight's webinar and it will be uploaded on YouTube after this evening. Just before we start, we're going to run a short poll to find out why you have joined us this evening. While you are answering the poll, I will hand you over to our hosts for the evening to introduce themselves. Kath and Kim, over to you.
Good evening. Oh gosh, I can see the poll. I wasn't expecting to be able to see it. Sorry. My name is Kath Lambert, and I'm one of the helpline managers. I've been a helpline manager for 2 years, but for about 5 years before that, I volunteered on the helpline. My background is in education. I worked in primary education in several different countries, so I've seen how different systems work, if you like. And I've also been a Senko in the past as well. Kim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kath. Hello, everyone. I am a specialist teacher and diagnostic assessor. I work primarily with employees and I am involved with setting up processes to help create dyslexia-friendly workplaces. I'm also one of the helpline managers. I job share with Kath and I've been at the BDA for about 4 years. And I'd just like to ask Claudia, have we got the results of the poll yet? Oh, there's the results of the poll.
Great, thank you so much. So the Q&A box is now live, so feel free to type your questions in there and we will get going. I'm going to start off with a question that we had sent in prior to this webinar, okay? So I'll read that to you now, Kath and Kim.
Thank you.
So, I think that my son, now 22 years old, has a form of dyslexia, but he has never been diagnosed. He started to talk at the age of 3, which we thought was mainly due to his trilingual upbringing. Later in primary school, he had difficulties concentrating, dreamed a lot during class, and struggled to produce written assessments. Some teachers were harsh on him, and we did not feel comfortable to ask for their help/opinion. I read aloud to him any texts he had to study for school and helped him with daily homework. During high school, somehow, he coped on his own, but preferred mathematics, IT, sports, music, and sciences. Because he was bright and polite, he managed to get good grades and finish his A-levels. Is there a way to get him tested for dyslexia or any other similar disorder that he might suffer from as a young adult? And where would we be able to seek that help?
Thank you. Kath, do you want to start us off on that one?
The answer is yes. You can get assessments for adults and for children. The BDA assess both adults and children, and you can be assessed by a specialist teacher or an educational psychologist. And often people think because it says specialist teacher, that's just for school, school age children. That's not true. A teacher can assess for an adult as well. Lots of the things that you mentioned could be indicators of dyslexia, but obviously dyslexia is a huge sort of, there's no checklist, there's no black and white, yes and no answers. So your son could well be dyslexic and you can arrange an assessment. The information's on our website. If you go to the services section, it will tell you how to complete the forms. Kim, is there anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I think you covered everything. That this young chap does have many indicators that could relate to dyslexia. It sounds like he's got loads of strengths as well, and he does really well at lots of subjects, which is also really positive. So, like Kath said, yeah, an assessment is the only way to be conclusive. Bex?
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So our next question says, if a child finds non-white paper helps minimize visual disturbances, should the school support its use? My child's school have said they cannot use any color except white paper. This gives her headaches and makes words fuzzy.
Well, we do get this question quite often through the helpline, don't we, Kath, where children or adults have a preference with colour paper. And of course, we would ask the school to provide photocopies on coloured paper, because that's the reasonable thing to do. It may be that the school wants some firm evidence that the child has some visual disturbance. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking as well about, I don't know whether your child's had their eyes tested to see, you know, whether there are other issues that could possibly be causing this kind of headachy feeling that they're getting. Some children wear tinted lenses, some children will, tinted glasses. You can also sort of experiment for reading, just with coloured, clear, see-through plastic, kind of like the A4 file things that you can buy. So sometimes if you're reading and you have an issue with the brightness of white paper, that can be helpful as well.
And just to add from what Kath said, that you can refer your child to a behavioural optometrist who will do a specialist, what's called a visual skills assessment. And there are many behavioural optometrists in the country. You'll need to do a search for them, or you could write into the helpline and we will send you a link to a directory of behavioural optometrists.
Yeah, it's called the British Association of Behavioural Optometrists. So I think their website is BABO. That springs to mind. But yeah, I mean, it is something that I think it would be reasonable for the school to try to accommodate.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's really helpful that you just mentioned that as well, because we just had someone in the chat ask where they would be able to access the visual assessors. So that's really great.
Okay.
So our next question is, my daughter has a diagnosis of dyslexia and auditory processing disorder. Reading about both, often the measures to help for one are at odds with the limitation caused by the other. How can I best help? A good example is the recommendations to learn to decode under dyslexia is at odds with the APD recommendations, saying to learn by sight as decoding will be unlikely to work.
I suppose the main thing I would think of as a specialist teacher is that you'd want to teach both approaches anyway, that you'd want to give visual approaches to learning letters and sounds and blends and words and spellings, but also phonic approaches. So you'd want to do both. Kath worked in schools. You might have more to say on that,
Yeah,
Kath.
I mean, primarily, there is no right or wrong answer. It's a case of looking at an individual's strengths and weaknesses, looking at the situation they're in, what age she is, what sort of learning she's doing, and then picking out the best fit, if you like. And because the child has difficulties with phonics, that doesn't mean you never do any phonics whatsoever. Yeah. It just means that you would primarily focus on another way of learning. So it is a case of playing to someone's strengths, and that's why, in a dyslexia assessment, when you look at the recommendations, that should be quite specific for your individual strengths and weaknesses. And of course, talk to the school about the way that they can sort of mix and match their support with what's outlined on the assessment.
Thanks, Kath.
Perfect. So our next question is, what is the process for enrolling a student with dyslexia into university?
Well, the enrolment, shall I start, Kath? The enrolment would be the same as any other student. They would just go through the enrolment process. We would always recommend that before you do that, you look at the different universities and look at their learning support provision. And then it's twofold. You contact the learning support teams in the university, and you also contact Student Finance England to do a disabled students allowance application. The shorthand is a DSA application, and that's done through your Student Finance England portal. There's a little section on it that says, do you have a health condition or additional needs? And you click yes and upload your evidence. So that activates the support that's bought in for your studies, which is specialist software, one-to-one tuition, welfare support if you need that. I mean, well-being support, but also contact the university learning support team for the university specific support, which might include exam allowances or extended library loans, possibly extensions to deadlines. Anything else, Kath?
The thing I thought of doesn't quite match up with the question, but it is important to visit the universities and look at the course content and also look at the method of assessment, because if you're somebody who doesn't do very well in exams, you need to make sure that the course you select is not all exam based. And some courses, you know, it might have the same name, but the way of delivery and the way it's assessed, the way the students work is very different. So that's something to be aware of, which is not quite what you asked, but if you are considering university, you need to think about that too.
You're talking about the prep, aren't you, before applying, which is really important. Often people don't think about different courses and different delivery styles. So I think it's really good you mentioned that.
Great, thank you. So this one's a little bit more broad. How do I support a teenager with global delays, brackets, SEN, who also has dyslexia and dyspraxia?
I'm assuming there've been diagnostic assessments for whatever the issues may be. They are obviously the best place to start because they will pick out strengths and weaknesses and make suggestions for learning techniques that could work. It's very important. I'm not sure if this has come from a parent or a teacher, so I'll be quite non-specific. It's very, very important that outside support and school support actually talk to each other. So the support outside of school is aware of what's going on inside of school so that you can support and complement what's going on. And also so that you need to make sure there are going to be regular reviews of the support so that adjustments can be made, or you know, you can identify if whatever the school is doing or whatever you're doing at home is not working, and then you can adapt and amend what's happening to support that child. Kim?
Yeah, and I was thinking as you were saying that it's such a general question, and you can look up all sorts of teaching tips and support strategies for supporting reading, writing and spelling for someone that's dyslexic, and you can look up all the different strategies for someone that's dyspraxic, which may relate more to movement and handwriting. And really, you still need to tailor those to the person because no two people will ever have the same needs. It will be the same multi-sensory methods of teaching to whatever ability that person is at to start with. Do you think, Kath?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of really good practical webinars on our website. Yeah. Sorry, not on the website, on the BDA YouTube channel. And if you look, you might see one and think, oh, it's perhaps directed at primary school and my child is 14. But have a look, because as we've said a couple of times, it's kind of mixing and matching and adapting to what works for you or what works for your child or the students that you're helping. So they are quite a good place to start. And even if, as I say, you think, oh no, that's not the right age for my child, you know, have a look and you can tease out ideas. And also with a 14-year-old, it's really quite important to involve them, talk to them. What do they think? What do they want? Because it's no good if you and the school decide you want to do something if the child says, no, I'm not doing that. You know, so children, they often have the best understanding of what's going to work for them.
Great, thank you. So how can I tell the difference between a child who is dyslexic and one who has just lost out learning time due to COVID and is a year or so behind?
Well,
Oh
I
gosh.
think, yeah, I think it's tricky, but there will be specific dyslexia related indicators with issues around working memory that will be quite specific, and issues possibly around left-right confusion. There will be early indicators. If that child went for a diagnostic assessment, they would very much look back at the early development and the language development and the physical development. There'll be anything else, Kath?
I think how that child is responding to whatever has been put in place for them. So if you've put a program in place, and as a teacher or SENCO, you would normally expect a specific level of progress or a speed of progress, and that's not happening, that could be a sort of measurable indicator, if you like, that there may be something more, if you like, than just having missed out on a year of schooling or whatever. But it is very difficult. Yeah, so I think putting things in place, monitoring them, looking out for specific signs. On the website, there's a couple of checklists.
Yeah, good.
Things to look out for, and they're all over the internet, you know. Although do take some of them with a pinch of salt, because most people, even non-dyslexics, would tick some of the signs of being dyslexic.
Yeah, but they give an overview, don't
Yeah.
they? And I think what Kath said about rate of learning and rate of progress, if that is out of odds, plus with maybe pronunciation issues, working memory issues, difficulties with spelling, even though they've been taught certain spellings. I think that's probably all we can say on that. Do you, Kath?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So our next question is, can dyslexia be associated with issues with social comprehension, emotional dysregulation, and other more social emotional difficulties, and affect learning styles / abilities beyond just reading? For example, affect how they assimilate rule learning, like in maths.
I think that's such a... Go on, Kath.
Yeah, I think Kim will probably be able to answer this better than I can, but I would say that a lot of sort of specific learning difficulties, they overlap in so many areas, and so some people with dyslexia read very well, others don't. Some people with dyslexia are, you know, incredibly nervous and suffer socially because perhaps they can't find the words, or they're conscious that their memory is doesn't appear to be as quick as everybody else's. So the answer, I guess, is yes and no. You'd need specialist sort of assessment to tease out the roots of whatever you perceive to be the issues and difficulties.
They're not, I think as well, Kath, I'd add that they're not typical indicators of dyslexia, are they?
No.
Social communication, social dysregulation, difficulties with understanding rules. I think they generally don't come up on the general checklists. But I suppose what we're saying is if someone's suffering some sort of stress or anxiety because of their learning, it could cause some of those issues, definitely. But it wouldn't be a particular indicator, would it?
No, I think that you would probably be able to examine and see whether those behaviours stemmed from an issue with literacy or an issue with language or comprehension or memory, rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the next person has asked, looking for ideas to boost my son's self-esteem. He has been diagnosed, he's 13 years old and feels like he is stupid because of low grades. Trying to find his strengths, he is a visual learner. Any recommendations, quick games, activities, or anything I can do to show him that he can succeed?
I think it's always good to start with what he's good at anyway. Would you say that, Kath, as well? That everybody's good at something, whether it's sports or art and creativity. It's good that's always a good starting point for developing a hobby in that area. So you're developing something really enjoyable and something that you can get a feedback loop of, I'm really good at this. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, and I think you say he's 13, so at some point in the next year or two, he'll be taking his GCSE options or BTEC. It's worth sort of thinking about these things before you he actually makes the option, takes the options, and talking to him about his strengths and weaknesses. So when he can drop some subjects, he can hopefully then focus on subjects that he feels more confident in or he enjoys. In general, for sort of self-esteem, and this is quite a good week to look into it, we have a lot of ambassadors who are sharing their stories, and some of them are young YouTube type people who would appeal to sort of 13-year-olds, the sports people, and if you can look and find people that he respects, admires and knows and understand that they've gone through a similar journey, so he doesn't feel like he's the only person.
And it's just also about focusing on strengths, isn't it? So we focus, say you were doing spelling with him, focusing on the spellings he gets correct or the bits of the words that he has got correct, rather than instantly focus on the one letter that's wrong. It's really good to change our language. It can be difficult to do, but to focus on the bits that are correct and the successes.
And I think, as I said earlier, the older students get, if you can give them more say in what they do, they're likely to respond. If you've been doing spelling in a certain way and you say to him, look, can you think of a better way to do this? And he might say, oh, I hate sitting down every night before dinner doing spellings. I'd rather whatever. And sort of let him take the lead a little bit.
Yeah, and finding strategies and tools, like if he can look a word up on a smartphone himself, rather than having to keep asking someone for words. It's also about finding the strategies that work and not thinking they're cheating. Often people say to us, oh, mustn't let my child use Google to find a spelling because it's cheating, but it isn't. It's giving them a good feedback, and it's also teaching them. If you copy a word down, then you're learning it. So
right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question is, so this child has a dyslexia diagnosis. Have you got any tips to help a child focus? They are easily distracted. Tips on help with time management, as they are hopeless / no real concept of time management.
Do we know an age or not?
No, not on this one.
I think younger kids, you can sort of have something visual they can see, whether it's an egg timer type thing, whether it's a sand, one of the ones that you turn up where you can see the sand going through. So something visual. Make sure they know that there is a start and an end to whatever it is you're doing. So, rather than just sort of, oh, we're going to do some writing, give it a start and an end. We're going to do some writing. And when you've written 4 ideas down, then we'll stop so that they can measure what they're doing. In school, it's a bit harder because in classrooms, there's always something going on somewhere. Just have a chat with the teacher. Where are they sitting in the classroom? Could they be moved away from the window? Could they be not sitting next to their best friend? Little things like that, just to help in the classroom, so there are fewer distractions. Kim?
And I think you made some really good points. I think working in short bursts can often be good for people with slight issues with attention. So like maybe working in 10-minute bursts. So we set a timer and say we're going to do some homework until the timer goes off. Like Kath said, it gives a clear ending. And it's short bursts and changing activity. So maybe you do a bit of reading for 10 minutes and then a little break and then a bit of writing for 10 minutes. So you sort of change topic and activity with nice things going on in between as well. Maybe do a drawing in between. And so often people work better in a short burst of time, don't they, Kath?
Yeah, and I think for secondary children and secondary pupils, secondary students, the teacher needs to be made aware that, this child finds it difficult to concentrate for more than 10 minutes. And so maybe in that class, there can be some sort of arrangement with the teacher that this child can, I don't know, have a fiddle toy for 5, after 10 minutes, or the teacher has a list on the board and says to, this class, when you get to here, you can have a break, but I would really like you to focus on these things, and just pointing it out to the teachers.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect, thank you. So a slight change of pace in this question. I am a health and wellbeing officer in a training organisation. We have a high number of learners coming from mainstream education with a late diagnosis of dyslexia. School has been a negative experience, and we are trying to help them achieve essential skills and qualifications. How can we support these learners when they haven't had any previous support? We also have learners with multiple diagnoses of dyslexia, ADHD, ASD.
So I think they could, it's a great question, and it's really heartwarming to have a question like that, I think, from a training provider who clearly wants to make a difference to the students who sound like they're a bit demoralised coming through the centre to learn their essential skills. And I think there's multiple things the teachers can be doing around identifying the learner's strengths, trying to work with those. People of that age often really like technology, so working with laptops or iPads with keyboards in the classroom can be great for supporting people with note-taking, and you can have readback software so they can have information read back to them if they're struggling with their reading. Hopefully you've explored giving them support in exams from these. I'm not sure what the training courses are, but sounds like they're qualifications, so ensuring that they're going to get their additional time, or to have additional breaks, or use computers in their exams. Is there anything else you could think of, Kath?
I mean, the only way to sort of get a formal diagnosis of dyslexia is to have full diagnostic assessment. However, there are screeners available. Now, some are very simple, and they're basically a list of do you get your left and right mixed up. But some of them will actually explore a little bit further, and you can get a little standardized report, which will, I mean, obviously, as I say, this is very, compared to a full diagnostic assessment, you're not getting anywhere near the same level of information. But it might be worth exploring some screeners that you could do in the college that would give people an idea of if they are dyslexic or not, or their strengths and weaknesses. Just to go back to what Kim was saying about assistive technology, smartphones will do and can do an awful lot, iPhones and the Android. So if people explore a little bit what smartphones can do to help with spelling, to help with reading, dictation, calendar features, to help with organisation, and I'm sure if you sort of gave your students the task of finding out, that would be something that could come very easily to them.
And great as a sort of training centre-wide initiative, wouldn't it, to have all the students learning how their smartphone can support their education, because people often don't realise that the amount of writing and checking they can do on a smartphone. So yeah, and I think differentiated learning really in the classroom. So if some students work better in the library, or they need to take time out and go and work in a different room, I think all of that should be enabled in a training centre environment. So,
and I think something else, when students move from the school environment into a less structured environment, such as a college, sometimes they need support to actually help them get organised, and because they have a bit more responsibility. By putting a bit of sort of support in there at the beginning, then they will learn to manage their workload, perhaps to manage whatever it is. And I think that can sometimes be forgotten.
That's a really good point, because sometimes you see a student's folder, don't you, Kath, and it's just a big mess, really, and they haven't filed it. And some people need to just know how page dividers work and how to label things and keeping it in order, and maybe lessons in that can be really positive, and how to plan your studies and how to plan your week and how to plan your study day.
Thank you so much. What advice would you give to a 15-year-old who is scared of being bullied if she uses adjustments in class, such as plastic overlay readers, things like that?
Yeah, we've heard this question before, and it's really unfortunate when someone feels that their reasonable adjustment singles them out and makes them appear different. And ideally, I suppose you'd want to speak to the school about it and try and get the teachers on board with somehow normalising the use of a coloured overlay or a laptop in class, But maybe also the child could have some time out with their laptop so they could work more in the library at times. What do you think, Kath? Is there any other idea?
I think sometimes when students are feeling that way, they're perhaps not aware of other people in the class who are also using support devices, may not be the same as theirs, because, you know, statistically in a class of 30, 3 have dyslexia, and there are lots of other issues that students have. So maybe, you know, if you can talk to the teachers, they might say, oh, we've actually got 3 children in that class who use a laptop, and so perhaps they could sit together and just become aware that there are other people accessing this support. And I think, again, as we mentioned before, the ambassadors and their stories about, you know, strategies that they developed. And again, as I say, you know, with a 15-year-old, ask them what they think would work for them. So if they don't want to use a laptop and you're worried that they're missing the content because they're not taking notes properly, ask if the teacher can send home the PowerPoint. So it's kind of a way round whatever it is that the child is struggling with.
Yeah, and I suppose ideally schools, if they had a raised awareness of dyslexia, like Dyslexia Awareness Week, if they kind of made use of the resources and had projects, it just normalizes things more, really, and makes it more everyday.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So, what is the difference between a specialist teacher or a psychologist for an adult assessment?
We get asked this question a lot as well, don't we, Kath? And generally we recommend, I mean, a specialist teacher assessment is completely comprehensive and works for any age group, including to university and above, to the workplace. We generally recommend that someone has an educational psychologist assessment if the person has more complex needs than, say, just dyslexia or just dyscalculia, if a person has other learning needs as well, because a psychologist has access to some different tests than specialist teachers have. Do you think I've answered that, Kath?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would say to that is if somebody is looking for a diagnostic assessment for a legal reason, you know, possibly some sort of tribunal, then we would suggest going for the educational psychologist report. And the other thing about diagnostic assessments is they are valid for life, as long as they're done by someone with the proper credentials. Both a specialist teacher and a psychologist report would be valid for life. So, you know, if you are in a situation where somebody's saying, oh, we can't accept that, it's more than 2 years old, that's something we hear quite a lot. That's not true. And what we would say to someone, if your last diagnostic report was done when you were 8 and you're now 38, you may possibly want to consider having one, because you'll still be dyslexic with strengths and weaknesses in the same area, but your strategies, your whole situation will have changed. So, but in theory, you know, your report shows that you are dyslexic and you're dyslexic.
It's just the recommendations that would change, isn't it? From a child's assessment to an adult at work, you would have different recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
So just a couple to piggyback off the back of this one.
Yeah.
So what is the cost of an assessment for an adult, and also what is the cost of an assessment of a child? And as well, which is kind of in the same area, how does one become a specialist assessor?
So costs vary. There is no one cost because assessors all set their own rates. So an assessment generally costs in the region of £500, would you say, Kath, as an average? But they can be a bit lower than that, or they can be more than that. An educational psychologist assessment is more than that. They're generally £700 and upwards. What was the second part of the question?
How does someone become a assessor, a specialist assessor?
Good question. So do you want to answer that bit, Kath?
If you're an educational psychologist, if you're a psychologist, you go down the educational psychology route. You need, for a teacher, you need a level 7 qualification. I can't remember the exact. Kim, what's
it's the specific learning difficulties qualification that we run at the BDA. It's a level 7 qualification, and all the information about it is on our website. So you would just go to the section on educator, and then you'll see the links there for the different courses that we've got for dyslexia assessors or dyscalculia assessors.
So to become a specialist teacher, you need a level 5 qualification. You have to be a teacher as well. And then for the assessment, it's a level 7 qualification. And as Kim says, everything's it's in the training section of the website.
Great. Thank you. So this next question says, hello, my 7-year-old son has been diagnosed with dyslexia and associated short-term memory problems, which impairs his learning at school. The school won't put anything in place to support his learning despite them being given a copy of his PATOS report. How can I support him and his struggles to write and with spelling?
If you go onto the BDA YouTube channel, there are some really, really good webinars on there with ideas about supporting children with reading, spelling.
There's a webinar this week, Kath, about supporting your child with reading.
Right.
Dyslexia Awareness Week.
And I know there's definitely a spelling one on there. There's also one called Multisensory Ideas on a Shoestring, because lots of the webinars will talk about multisensory learning, which is finding different ways of doing things rather than writing your letters with a pen and paper. Use a whiteboard, put some flour on the tabletop, and the child can sort of do the
tracing
flower with his finger. So it's a case of sort of looking at what else is out there. The school doesn't have to legally accept the findings or the recommendations of a diagnostic assessment. However, it's a resource for them that can give them ideas and support. So I would definitely sort of speak to the school again. And what they might do is say, look, we're not able to put these recommendations in place. However, what we are doing is A, B, C, D, which is slightly different to what it says on the report. But if you do this at home, it's complementing and supporting what's going on in school.
Yeah, and if the child's got short-term memory weakness, which is a common issue with dyslexia, is one of the diagnostic criteria, then again, working in short bursts of time rather than great long sessions, when you notice the child's losing attention, then it's generally better to stop at that point if you can't get their attention back. And repetition. And like Kath said, lots of multisensory tracing and verbalizing and lots of going over the same activities in lots of different ways, using games. There's so many games that work around spelling and reading and maths.
So, again, if you go back to the school and you find out that next term they're doing weather, you can start not by teaching weather at home, but talking about the weather, using the right vocabulary, perhaps watching weather forecasts, so that you're sort of laying a base so when your son does start studying weather, if you like, the vocabulary is familiar to him. So the issue with short-term memory, you're sort of preempting some of the problems or issues that he may have, if that makes sense.
I think that's a really good answer. So our next question is, what additional help can I get as a 45-year-old who struggled all my life with dyslexia?
Additional help? Well, it's a tricky question, that, because it's quite general, because we sometimes get people that want to know what help they could have at home with improving their memory or remembering things like PIN numbers, or it may be that you're talking about additional help at work. We do find that we meet lots of people that haven't discovered some of the inbuilt technology that's on their laptop. So there are built-in screen readers, there are built-in dictation tools, which can make a really tremendous difference to the way you might write an email or write a text if you're dictating it. Getting things read back can help you to proofread and understand something that someone sent to you. And those things can all be used at work. But you may have been talking about home. Have you got any tips and ideas for home, Kath, for dyslexia, generic dyslexia?
Yeah, we mentioned with further education students, if you have a smartphone, they can do so much. You can set reminders, you can dictate notes into it, so a shopping list. You can photograph text and then select the text and it can be read out to you. So that sort of exploring the tools that you have to hand and the things that they can do. If you have a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone or an Android, go into settings and then go into accessibility. And then the vocabulary changes. Sometimes it's read aloud, sometimes it's speak aloud. But just go into settings, accessibility, and explore what your phone can do to help you on a day-to-day basis. Sorry, do you want to?
No, I was just going to say that if because it was such a generic question, if you write a list of exactly what you need to work on or develop within your day, that can be a good starting point, can't it, Kath? Because it may be some of the things that we've said, or it may be something different that we haven't mentioned, in which case you could just email us that question. Really,
if the question was sort of what sort of help can we get sort of in terms of benefit or anything like that, that's not something we can answer. You would have to go through to the government
job centre,
to look at for job support and that kind of thing.
Right. Thank you. So this person has asked, when ticking the box on the job application, and I'm presuming that's the reasonable adjustment, any kind of disability to declare box, what difference could that make in the interview?
Well, it can, in some organisations, it can trigger a response from their recruitment team, hopefully, that they would see that tick and then they would contact you to find out what support do you need through the recruitment process, through the interview, or whether there's some tests in the recruitment, which there may be. I often say to people that if you do tick that box and you don't hear anything back, then it's a good idea to chase them up, to let them know what support you want through the recruitment process, because it may be that it's been misplaced. So I often say to people, or we both often say to people, don't we, Kath, never assume that the help's going to be there at the point of interview if you haven't really discussed it and said exactly what it is that you need.
I think a little bit like, when you're talking to schools, the more specific you can be, the better.
Yeah.
On the website, we've got some ideas about reasonable adjustments in an interview, the sort of things that Kim mentioned. So if you have a look, there's advice, it's in the advice section. Adults.
It's in the adults at work section. It then says reasonable adjustments, and there's lists, isn't there, of some of the thing to do is to read the list and then pick out a couple of things that you may think, oh, that's exactly what I need. And they may ask for some evidence. In fact, they most likely will ask for evidence that you do have an invisible disability. So be prepared for that as well.
And on that point, if you don't have a diagnostic assessment, again, I mentioned screeners earlier. If you do an internet search for different dyslexia screeners, there are so many out there, but you actually want one that's going to sort of give you some meat rather than just a checklist. Have a look and you can compare what's out there. A lot of them have little clips of how
like demonstrations.
Right, thank you. Right, so our next question is, my daughter was diagnosed with dyslexia last week. It has been an uphill battle to get the diagnosis. We now need to talk to her about it. Please, can you advise how we can discuss it with her?
There's a really cool little, Bex will probably know where it is. I think it's on the website under dyslexia, and it's like a little cartoon.
Is it? I think it's under Is My Child Dyslexic?
Is it? It's
a really nice little cartoon. It's also on the YouTube channel, and it's a very positive message, isn't it, about strengths and everybody's different. Yeah.
There's also a really good thing on the BBC, which I can't remember where I wrote it down. But if you go on the BBC, they have some children talking about being dyslexic, and that's, I think it's in BBC, not CBBC, the news round sort of section. I can't actually remember.
There are some good books, aren't there, Kath? If people Google dyslexia children, because we don't know what age this person is, there are age-related books. There's books for young children, mid-range age and teenagers, and then adults, obviously, that have good explanations in them, and you'd be looking for a book that talks about strengths, that doesn't just focus on someone's difficulties.
And the ambassadors, again, you know, the stories that we've got on the website and on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to pick up the pace for the last 15 minutes because we've still got quite a lot of questions to get through. So this next one says, my daughter is 12 and was diagnosed with dyslexia last year. She uses a laptop mostly for big writes in school. However, her handwriting is really difficult to read. Spelling, grammar is all an issue in her school books. Do you have any ideas on how to best support handwriting and try to improve this? Or should we try and encourage her to use a laptop more frequently, even when doing smaller, shorter pieces of work? This girl's 12.
This is a really difficult one, isn't it, Kath? Because there's lots of evidence that says that it's very difficult to improve your handwriting after a certain age, and that if someone does have the motor processing issues associated with dyslexia, then even though handwriting practice is good, it may still be that the child writes very, very slowly, and that spelling issues will slow them down even more. And if someone is taking notes in class, that's not necessarily the best way to take notes. So I would always personally, as a teacher, want them typing fast in class so that they're capturing all the information that they need, and so they're comfortable writing and they're fluent with their writing, and maybe practicing handwriting as a sideline to that. I don't know what you think, Kath.
Yeah, I mean, it's really helpful if children develop their touch typing and IT skills in general, because I think one of the reasons that schools sometimes shy away from them is by the time you've got everybody's computer out and somebody doesn't know how to use it properly, you can't actually teach a lesson. So it's really important that the kids are very fluent at using these tools. The other thing is speak to the teachers, because sometimes the teachers will set work, and the purpose of the work is to find out what the child knows. So rather than write a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, can there be an alternative found? Could a poster do? Could some bullet points do? Could a spider diagram, a mind map spider diagram do instead? So that the work is being covered, but you're taking out the bit that is causing the stress, if you like. And that can be an option when, as I say, the knowledge is being tested rather than the writing. Unfortunately, in some subjects, it's always going to be, writing is the main focus. So again, speak to, for example, the English teacher. Can there be a specific focus? Could they say to the child, right, this week, I'm really going to look at your spelling in the first paragraph, and then after that, concentrate on the content? Or can they say, look, I really want a good introduction and a good conclusion. They're the bits I'm really going to focus on. And that's not to say forget about the middle bit, but just the child only has to focus on specific parts rather than the whole thing.
Great. Thank you, Kath.
Thanks,
so the next question is, we're applying for colleges. My child's in year 11 and they're worried that they won't get the grades. She's very able but struggles with exams and is worried she won't get into college. Can you offer any advice? Well,
we would hope that this young person is going to have exam access arrangements to try and level the playing field, which can be additional time, as we've just talked about, using a laptop if they're a good typer and it's their normal way of working. That can be used in exams. And the idea of that is to level the playing field. So if they're a capable, able student, that will then be reflected in their exams. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, there's a webinar this week. It's actually on YouTube about exam access arrangements.
That was last week, yeah.
Yeah, so you need to speak to the school about that, but have a look about the webinar. You don't need a diagnostic assessment in order to get exam access arrangements. That's quite important.
But the school does need to generate evidence, don't they? And what they call normal way of working.
And again, speak to the college, look at the courses, not just the course content, but the delivery and the expected outcomes. As I said before, if it's a course where it's all exam based and yet exams are not your forte, look around and find something that's going to play to her strength.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. So this person has asked, How do I make sure I'm giving enough attention to dyslexic students in my class?
I think that's a tricky one, because many dyslexic students will feel that they need a bit more attention, that they may need to be visited a bit more by the teacher to check that they're on track with what they're writing, that they've understood what's being asked of them, that their priorities for tasks is intact. So I would hope that the students that need that will get that additional visit from the teacher or a bit of time after class. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, I think asking the child what they think they have to do, just to make sure that, you know, you're all on the same page. And when I was talking before about with advice for the student about picking what is important for that task. So if the homework is to write an essay about Henry VIII's wives, you know, think of a way that that can be adapted for your dyslexic students and say to them, look, I know that I asked you to write an essay, but I would like you to really focus on 3 of the wives rather than all of them, or whatever. So you're adapting the work.
And I think it's oh, go on, sorry.
So I was just going to say, from a classroom management point of view as well, just making sure that the children, the students with dyslexia are there so that you can just, you know, give a glance to them. They're not sitting by the door, so they're looking out the window because they're perhaps more easily distracted than others.
And dyslexia friendly sort of classroom teaching practices in general, isn't it, as well? Because then you're harnessing all the learners, but particularly the dyslexic learners.
And most classrooms have whiteboards, changing the background of the whiteboard so it's not bright white, so it's perhaps slightly grey. So you're taking away that possible reflection and contrast between black and white. As Kim said, dyslexia friendly sort of practices, and there's some information in the advice for educators.
Yeah, there is. There's creating a dyslexia friendly classroom approach on our website. So if teachers adopted those, then plus visit the dyslexic children a bit more, then hopefully that would embrace and answer that question.
Great, thank you. So my son had a diagnosis of dyslexia, and he is showing signs of dyspraxia and ADD too. However, the problem that the school and the GP are having to diagnose ADD is that the symptoms of dyslexia overlaps into ADD categories. Is that correct? How would I know if it's dyslexia and or ADD, or potentially both? That was a bit of a confusing one, but did you get the gist?
Yeah, we got the gist. And I think we do get this question as well. And obviously specific learning difficulties or neurodiversities overlap. We expect that, really. And it depends on the age of the person as to how much you feel you need to explore 2 diagnoses, because one diagnosis is enough to get all the support and the exam arrangements that somebody would need, whether it's for handwriting or attention. So it kind of depends on that. Would you say, Kath?
Yeah, and also sometimes if you have one diagnostic assessment, it's a good idea to sort of embed that in. And then if you feel, as I've said before, progress is not being made, or the school needs more help in knowing where to go next, then you might want to consider having a second diagnostic assessment. Because sometimes, you know, 2, 3 possibly diagnostic assessments for different things are not always going to give you 3 lots of information. There's going to be an overlap.
And we often meet people who say, I'm dyslexic, but I have poor attention span and my handwriting's poor and my manual dexterity isn't great. So potentially that's that person that we're talking about. The support would still be the same for all those weak spots, regardless of how many diagnoses someone has.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, I'm dyslexic and I struggle when I get loads of emails to write and read in one day at work. It makes me very overwhelmed. What's your advice?
That's a tricky one, because we often get overloaded with emails, don't we? And they're very difficult to categorize and organize, because if you make folders and put them into folders, they're then not in your view. So we meet people that have lots of different ways of organising them, don't we, Kath? And obviously screen readers make a huge difference to this situation. If you could have all your emails just read to you, then that would speed you up and you would know that you were accurate. So that would be my ideal, is you'd have that piece of software, and categorising them really, if possible, and flagging the ones that you want to come back to. What do you think, Kath?
Yeah, I was thinking about categorising. You know, you can have a sort of do today, do tomorrow, you know, do on Friday sort of system.
Colour coding.
Yeah, and to categorise, you just click on the email, don't you? And then it comes up categorised, and you can pick different colours and things. So yeah, I think unfortunately
it's easy to get overwhelmed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also you can, if you have this kind of environment at work where you can try and not be copied in on emails that are not essential to you, because sometimes we're copied in, aren't we? And we don't actually need to particularly read much of it to realise that we're not going to action anything from that.
I guess the other thing could be, if you felt happy, you could perhaps have some sort of automatic reply saying, I've received your email. Please know I'm dyslexic. It may take me longer to get back to you than you would expect. Please bear with me. But that would depend whether you would feel happy with that sort of level of.
Yeah, we've met people that do. Yeah,
it's a possibility.
Okay, so this is going to be our last question because we've got 3 minutes left of the webinar. However, I have missed out. We had so many questions. So I just really want to encourage everyone that didn't have their question answered today to make sure that you contact the helpline and ask your question directly to them. All their contact details can be found on the website. Claudia will share a link in the comments where you can find them. They are also doing an Instagram live on our Instagram account. That's at BDA Dyslexia. Tomorrow all day they're going to be answering questions live again on there. So if your question wasn't answered tonight, you can type it in and you will get a text response tomorrow. Again, apologies to anyone that didn't get their question answered today. So our last question tonight is, hello, what advice and guidance and direction could you kindly give a mature adult formerly diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD who is studying at college, and the college has no funding to offer one-to-one support or any support that I've had in the past? I am quite worried, as I know this will make a difference whether I pass or fail this 2-year course which I have paid for. In my past qualifications, I am indebted to the special needs support and they have helped me achieve my other qualifications. Apparently, this lack of support is not considered discriminatory. Many thanks.
I think that's a really tricky one because there are many colleges that do have learning support and do have good learning support. So I would wonder if this course you're doing could be done at a different further education college, that you could look on their website and find out that they do have learning support. And I think if you do have to stay there and there's no support, I would think you would need to explore some of the specialist software we've talked about to help you with the reading and writing demands of the course, because it's very hard to find support, isn't it, Kath?
Yeah, and
it's not there.
Yeah, we often get this query from specific people doing specific exams. And if you go back to their website and look at their sort of course content or examination, it usually says something about reasonable adjustments. So whilst they may not be great at offering support, it is important as well to look at reasonable adjustments, because, you know, dyslexia is recognised as a disability and there should be, for example, some sort of exam access arrangements put in place for you. The other issue with that is quite often organisations are not that switched on to doing it. So it's no good sort of going 2 weeks before your exam. You have to be there months before saying, look, I've got dyslexia. What do you need from me? These are the things I'd like to request, so that things can be put in place with plenty of time.
Thanks.
Perfect. Well, I think that just about sums up this evening. Thank you so much to Kath and Kim for answering all these really insightful questions. And I hope that even if your question wasn't answered this evening, that you maybe found it useful to learn about some other areas of dyslexia too. All the information can be found on our website, and Claudia has shared contact details for the helpline. This webinar will be uploaded to YouTube tomorrow, so you will have access and you can share it to whoever you might find useful. Remember that we've got the helpline Q&A on Instagram tomorrow as well. So once again, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Dyslexia Awareness Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.